Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Canada's inflation rate has cooled again, but the cost of living remains high. Food and housing in particular. We'll get a preview from CBC reporter Mira Baines on the federal government's fall economic outlook and how it plans to tackle affordability. We want to hear from you on how you're coping with rising costs, plus grief and bereavement. Where have you turned to for support, and what would have helped during difficult times? We hear from a researcher who helped author a groundbreaking report on British Columbians' experiences with grief. I'm Lien Yeung. This is BC Today. And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. In about an hour, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland will present the federal government's fall fiscal update. Government sources have told CBC it's expected to include billions of dollars in loans and funding to go towards building more affordable housing. Plus, new mortgage rules for homeowners at risk. The high cost of housing and shelter remains one of the key drivers of inflation in this country, even as that inflation rate has decreased. We want to know, how are you coping with the affordability crisis? Our phone lines are open. You can call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can, of course, also email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. But first, we're going to get a preview of the Trudeau government's fall economic outlook. Our Mira Baines is watching this story very closely, and she's live with me right now, and she's in our control room. So, Mira, what do we know about how the federal government is planning to help Canadians tackle affordability?
Lien, we're going to be hearing a lot about this throughout the day. So we'll be hearing some of the nitty-gritty details about how the federal government plans on helping people with affordability, dealing with those rising food costs, and dealing with the rising costs associated to housing, especially as people's mortgages roll over, as we see more renewals and higher interest rates really hitting people hard. What the federal government wants to do is avoid recession, but that's difficult to do when you have an economy where people are set to cut back some of their discretionary spending. I'm here in the control room, as you mentioned. This is where we'll be watching that news conference with Chrystia Freeland outlining the fall economic outlook. This is basically a bit of a mini budget, if you will, but it doesn't have the hardline costs that you would see in the budget in February. But we'll be getting more details about where the government is going. Are they cutting back on spending? Where are they spending? How are they going to help people with housing? I want you to take a listen to Sean Fraser. This is a federal housing minister, and he talks about something we'll be seeing in this outlook that'll be announced in about an hour.
We do believe by addressing the challenge around short-term rentals, as the recent example from the province of British Columbia demonstrates, has the potential in the short term to bring on new pockets of supply, particularly in environments that have a large number of short-term rentals, whether it's Airbnb or some other particular service that short-term rentals are using. My sense is if there's tens of thousands of units that we can turn into not a competitor for a hotel or for a few nights, but a home for a family and a community, it's incumbent upon us to do everything we can to use the properties that are available for homes.
Lien, specifically about those nitty-gritty details, we only know a few, but one of them does have to do with Airbnb. And specifically what the federal government is looking at is no longer allowing people who have Airbnbs to claim income tax deductions on rental expenses for those Airbnbs. We know that the British Columbia government is cracking down on Airbnbs already. The market in British Columbia on real estate listings, we're seeing a lot of one-bedroom listings, more than we've seen in a while. And also, Freeland is expected to announce billions of dollars in low-interest construction loans to spur more rental housing construction. And in terms of mortgage relief, now this is something that people are going to be very intensely focused on. And that has to do with rule changes like allowing for extensions of amortization periods and also the waiving of fees related to delayed payments. So we're hoping to hear a lot more on that.
Yeah, Mira, and not just you and I watching this announcement very closely, expecting for this to make big waves. So how significant is this fiscal update politically for the federal Liberals?
Well, some experts say, well, this isn't that significant, but other experts say it's very significant in terms of political support. And some people say that this really, the political fortunes of the federal Liberals really are focused on the economy. People are going to have to make some hard decisions in the next several months about who they'll be voting for. Do they feel that the federal government, the federal Liberals, have been good stewards of this economy or not? Or would it be better off in someone else's hands?
Right. And those other hands, they have been making their expectations known. What are those other parties calling for?
Well, Pierre Poilievre, a federal conservative leader who has sort of remade his image, he's been gaining a lot of support. He's been attending a lot of rallies. He was at one last week here in British Columbia in Duncan. He had a huge crowd out. Now, what he's doing is he's calling for an end to plans to increase the carbon tax. He wants interest rates to come down. That might not be something that the federal government really has stewardship over, but he wants an end to inflationary spending, or what he calls inflationary spending. And he also wants a plan for the federal government to bring it back to balance. But on the other hand, we also see NDP leader Jagmeet Singh talking about the everyman and what every single person out there is dealing with, and that's higher food costs as well as higher housing costs. And in terms of food costs, he's very specific. He's calling for a doubling of the GST rebate. He wants a national school food program, and he also wants affordable housing to be built, more affordable housing to be built, but he also wants post-secondary institutions also to receive low interest loans so that way they can build more student housing. So we're expecting a lot out of this fall economic update. We're not sure exactly what's in it, but we are hoping for some relief for people out there.
Yeah, you and everyone else, Mira. Okay, we'll see what actually ends up in that outlook in a little bit. So thank you so much for that, Mira Baines. And that was Mira Baines, who's live with us. So in about, as Mira said, about 45 minutes, the federal government will be giving its fall fiscal update. And you should stay tuned because CBC will be carrying that as a live national news special. And we'll bring that to you on CBC Radio 1, CBC News Network as well. So that starts at 1 o'clock Pacific time, 2 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone. And a reminder, our phone lines are open. We want to hear, how are you coping with affordability crisis? What kind of pressures are you feeling at home? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. All right, let's bring in our next guest on this topic. Murray Baker is a manager of financial empowerment at Family Services of Greater Vancouver. Good afternoon, Murray.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to have you back. So, Murray, the headline figure on inflation is that the rate is trending downwards. We're seeing it at 3.8%, but that rate is still quite high for some of the other products that we're talking about. And you heard Mira talk about food costs, about housing costs. What's jumping out at you from today's data?
Absolutely. And, there were some encouraging signs in terms of a decrease in gas prices. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the clients we work with aren't all that impacted by lower gas prices because they take public transportation. Where they are feeling the pinch, and this is areas that have been stubbornly high in terms of inflation and continue to be high, is rent, which up 8.2% year over year, and food up over 5%. So that's really hitting our clients very hard.
Right. And I believe I heard one of our reporters, our financial reporters on CBC News Network saying this morning that jump in rent is about one of the highest jumps in 40 years. So it's pretty unbelievable. So this inflation rate, though, is technically coming down, but it's still on top of what was already such a big jump in prices. What are your clients telling you about how the cost of living is hurting them?
Well, it's really impacting them in a number of ways. Is they're having to make some difficult decisions. So, for instance, this inflationary figure shows the food and rental accommodation have gone up. Other areas, whether it be recreation or clothing, those are areas that if that was a difficult area in terms of inflation, they could get around it, but they can't get around rent and they can't get around food because those are essentials to live by. So they're having to decide in some cases, there's only enough money to pay the rent. We don't want to be homeless. So perhaps we have to cut back on food and either eat less, skip meals, or eat less nutritious meals.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that those are some of the sacrifices people are talking about having to make. So I also want to talk a little bit about interest rates. We know that's been hiked 10 times since the start of last year. So are you seeing, is this deceleration of inflation evidence that interest rates are working in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that it is having an impact, but it's certainly not having the impact as quickly as I'm sure the Bank of Canada would have liked to see. So it is impacting, and certainly the people, different segments of the population are really struggling. If they have any debt, they're paying more in terms of trying to keep ahead of in the higher interest rates. They're also having to struggle in terms if they don't have the cash, they may have to turn to some of the less desirable sources of funds, and that is the payday lenders or the predatory lenders, which have charge huge interest rates. And that just puts them in a hole they dig deeper and deeper. So what we do at Family Services is we like to support people in terms of before you go to a predatory lender, are there some other benefits that you might be able to access that will enable you to avoid those, or things such as the rent bank or some of the safer grants for seniors who are struggling with housing, or even some of the additional local subsidies that they may be eligible for that are ways to avoid some of those predatory lenders that hit people so badly.
Yeah, and we're going to have to talk about some of those options with you in a little bit, Murray, but I wanted to turn to the phones first. Our phone lines, of course, are open, so you can call us at 1-800-825-5950, or if you're in the Lower Mainland, 604-669-3733, and email at bctoday@cbc.ca. And I've got a caller on the line with me. So Cam from Cobble Hill, thanks for joining us, Cam.
Yeah, hello, yes.
Tell us about what's going on with you.
Well, my house insurance alone has gone up $700 in 1 year. Oh. I have earthquake and fire and everything on it, so $700 in 1 year just for my home insurance.
Wow.
One thing I want to complain about CBC, too, is we do not know what even our debt is, how much spending has gotten out of control by all levels of government. Before, people took care of themselves more. Now, anything goes wrong, they run to the government and get more money. And I think CBC should start looking more and ask more questions about our debt, especially with interest rates higher. What is the debt of Canada? Where's all this? I think the money is just being printed as fast as they can print it, and it's being backed by nothing. And I think CBC has not done a good job of looking at that. I never hear what Canada's debt is, what BC's debt is, or anything like that. It's just print more money, complain, and everybody receive more money.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, Cam. I know we're certainly, the government is running into deficit right now, and there's talks about budget cuts everywhere. So Cam, with your house insurance going up $700 alone, are you struggling as well, looking at food costs, mortgage rates or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do all the shopping and that, and I watch for good deals and buy in bulk and divide it up and that, but I mean, it just never ends. I think we're in for a depression coming up. I think our dollar is backed by nothing. I think, like I say, they're just printing it, and I think we're in for a reckoning, and I think it's going to be very, very hard.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are indeed struggling. So, Cam, thanks for calling in with that perspective. Murray, I take that to you. I know you're the guy on financial literacy. Is that something that you or other, economists seeing in the forecast that we could be headed for, a financial depression?
Well, there are some signs that we're moving to a recession, and it's always hard to predict. Some have said we're in the early stages of a recession, and it's really difficult to see. A lot of it is that fine line that the Bank of Canada walks in terms of, do we raise interest rates to bring down inflation, or if we raise them too quickly or too high, then we can go too far in forcing a recession, which tends to impact a lot of people. And yes, it brings down inflation, but it has the negative effect of ending up with people losing their jobs and layoffs, in which case inflation does come down because people do not have the paycheck to buy a lot of those goods.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see kind of when you push one lever, what actually ends up happening and trickling down into the economy, right? And you know, Cam just now talked about how, you know, feels like the government's printing money, and because we're all under this affordability crunch, that they are trying to pour money into the economy. So based on this outlook, as we heard from Mira earlier, we are expecting billions of dollars in funding to support housing construction when that economic statement is presented this afternoon. So we'll have that live special, of course, at 1 o'clock. What measures do you think would make housing more affordable for your clients?
Well, I definitely, you know, a subsidized housing, more subsidized housing is necessary. You know, the issue with the housing is that a lot of this action should have been taken years ago when the early signs were out there that we were struggling or where there was a shortage of housing. Now it's a case, I think the government's scrambling to take a lot of measures very quickly, do a lot of spending to try and bring things on board quickly. But it does take time to work through the system. So I think we have some years ahead where we're going to experience a continued housing shortage. And, you know, I think really that we need to look at things like opening up more government lands for subsidized and affordable housing, because it's right now we're in a really bad situation, and we've seen this continue to get worse. And I'd love to say that it's going to get better quickly, but I think we're in for some more pain before things turn around.
That's not the outlook that we want to hear, Murray.
Well, it's, you know, I'm just trying to be realistic in terms of, you know, it does take
Totally
time
fair.
for building to come along. And, you know, that's certainly what we're here to support people in the meantime until things can turn around.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we want to know, how are you trying to, you know, keep things afloat in your household? What kind of financial pressures are you facing? How are you managing your finances in this affordability crisis? You can call us. Our phone lines are open to you, 1-800-825-5950. Or if you're in the Lower Mainland, 604-669-3733. You can hit star or pound 690 on your cell phone. Of course, email, that works too, bctoday@cbc.ca. All right, we have Frank, who is on the line with us from Victoria. Hi, Frank. So I hear you've got some tips.
Well, some tips especially for seniors like myself to save money is, you know, when I went to Rexall, for example, or so on, I mean, you sign up for a card. I've got quite a few cards in my wallet, but you sign up and you get $10 off. So, you know, you get $10 off, but, you know, every time you spend money at the store, you get points, and then you get $10 off. So a lot of times I'll get $10 off at $5 off at London Drug. Mm-hmm. And then I'll get $10 off at Thrifty's. Then I get another $10 off at Rexall. It all adds up. And there's an ad called Flip that I really like. That when you want to, if I'm at a grocery store and the peanut butter is at a certain price, you can just check the Flip, and it'll tell you which stores, like which has the cheapest price. It's a really good app. I like it. I use it a lot. And because the stores are so close to each other, a lot of time you'll have Thrifty, you'll have Save On Food, you have Fairways. They're all so close to each other that if I'm in one store, hey, well, Fairways is just like 4 blocks away, and it's a lot cheaper, you know? So Flip is a really good app. I like that.
That's a great tip. So thank you for that, Frank. So Flip, that's the app that you've been talking about, right?
Yeah, it is. It's great. It's free and it's awesome.
Yeah. And Frank, are you finding now, as grocery prices have really skyrocketed over the last year, 2 years, are you finding that you're leaning more towards, you know, couponing, looking at loyalty programs? Are you doing more of that now?
Oh, I do, because a lot of times, too, a lot of stores will warranty a certain product from another store. So if I'm at one store and I look at the Flip has all the flyers are on there from all the stores. And if you're at Save On Food and if somebody's got it cheaper, you show it at Save On Food, and like the guy says, we'll match the price, and you know, it's a good way to do things, you know.
Frank, you're almost making money. These are great tips that you're sharing with us. Yeah. And Frank, I wanted to know, you know, if you're a senior, I'm assuming you're on a fixed income. Are you finding that it's harder to try and keep up with cost of living as prices are going up?
Well, senior, I guess I'd be 64 this year, but I'm still driving school buses right now. I've got another 2 years, and I hope to retire in 2 years from now, but... yeah, driving school buses, so not fully retired, but, you know, living on and it's fixed income, not fixed, but it's, you know, the rent is expensive because I'm paying with, it's a good $1,300, $1,400 a month there for rent, and it's adding up. you know.
Yeah, I bet it is. Okay, well, Frank, thank you for calling in with those great tips. So I just wanted to toss it back over to Murray. Are you seeing that senior clients have to cut down and manage their finances more?
Absolutely, because certainly a lot of seniors aren't in the position if they're in, if they're an 80-year-old is not going to run out necessarily and get a gig job to make ends meet. So they don't have that option. Maybe the 30 or 40-year-old would have. So they are struggling that way, and they are cutting back and certainly making use of any of those apps. You mentioned Flip. Another good one is Reeby. Another good app is Too Good to Go, which alerts you if there's food that's coming close to the expiry date, but it's still good food. It alerts you, and you can go to that location and get the food at a much discounted rate. So that's another one you might want to check out.
All right, I'm writing those down. Thank you, Murray. So Flip, Reeby, Too Good to Go, some of the apps that could, give you some cost savings. I'm going to head over to Victoria again. Dallas, you have some thoughts about co-op housing.
Hi, I do. I just want to say I'm completely behind that last caller, too, because I'm 66. My spouse is 69, and we both retired in 2019. Then the pandemic happened. Everything fell apart. We're renters. We got rent-evicted. So
I'm sorry,
it's
that's
really difficult.
terrible.
Well, my husband being 69 and working full-time is, sucks.
Yeah,
Anyways,
absolutely.
yeah. We'd love to be able to get into co-op housing if there was any available. The federal government got out of supporting that years ago, and I really think that they should take another look at that, because rather than just allocating land and giving developers a break, why not invest in cooperative housing? Because the people in those co-ops are then paying back the loan from the federal government.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I think it might be a good option for people. And there's very few co-ops now. I mean, they're out there, but they're all getting pretty old, and nobody wants to move out of them because, they're moving into an era of where rents are just unreasonable for everyone.
Right, for sure. And Dallas, what's your housing situation right now that you're in?
We rent. We since 2021, before the market went absolutely insane here in Victoria, we managed to find a place for $17.50 a month. Prior to that, we were paying $1,200 a month, and that's the place we got rent-evicted from.
Wow, that's a big jump.
That was a big jump, but to try and rent the place that we're in now, people would be paying $2,300 a month.
Right. Yeah,
so,
and
in the matter, and developers and rental agencies, and when we were looking, we looked at this one apartment, and it was $1,850, and there was problems with parking, and so we decided, well, we'll come back and look at that. We had someplace else to look at. We came back a week later. No, not even a week later. I think it was 4 days later, and said, well, if that apartment is still available, and they said, oh, no, it's not, or yes, it is, but the rent has gone up.
Wow.
And they were, in the matter of like less than a week, they adjusted the rent, and it went from $1,800 to $2,100.
Wow.
Because that was market rent, and we were told by the managers that the development company that owns the buildings judged, they observe all the time what market rents are. So, I mean, it's just another case of, the market is driving us all into the poorhouse. Somebody's getting rich, but it's not us down at the bottom on fixed incomes or families or young people wanting to get into the market. I feel so badly for them.
I hear you.
All in the soup, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you for that, Dallas. Thank you for that perspective and sharing where you're coming from. And, we saw even in the inflation numbers that 8.2%, that's the, I think, highest jump in 40 years in terms of rents. I wanted to come back to you, Murray. So, that I think Dallas's story is probably one you've heard often about rent jumping up, and she suggested co-op housing. Is this something that I saw you nodding away as she was talking about that? You have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think co-op housing is something that the government should look at again. And co-op housing, the nice thing is when you're in a place, as your caller mentioned, you don't want to move out, but you're not going to be forced out. What we're seeing now is that as owners are struggling with making their mortgage payments, every time that the interest rate goes up, mortgage rates go up, it puts more pressure on the landlord. And in some cases, particularly in BC, we're seeing the landlord saying, well, we can't afford this anymore. We can't raise the rate on our tenant. We're going to sell. And then all of a sudden that tenant is forced to go out and look at places in market rates. Now, if they've lived in their place maybe 10 or 15 years, they may be facing an increase in rent of 50% or more. So, and that's hard for people to absorb, particularly if you're on fixed income.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. And I think Dallas made a very convincing case of that, right? Hearing about being rent evicted, and then every time you go back and revisit your rent, all of a sudden it's jumped up $500-600. So it's really quite something I think that everybody is grappling with. All right, Murray Baker, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for giving us your insight, what your clients are sharing, and of course, some of those great tips. Thanks for being with us, Murray.
Thanks for having me.
So Murray Baker is a manager of financial empowerment at the Family Services of Greater Vancouver, and he joined me live today. All right, coming up in our second half hour, dealing with grief after a loved one's death. What kinds of supports are available in this province, and what would have helped you while in bereavement? We'll talk about that in our next half hour. Right now, it's the news with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Lawyers representing Ibrahim Ali against first-degree murder allegations say they will not call any evidence. Ali has pleaded not guilty to sexually assaulting and killing a 13-year-old girl in Burnaby Central Park 6 years ago. The Crown has completed its case, and today defense lawyers told the jury the prosecution failed to meet the burden of proof. The judge has asked jurors to return next week to hear closing arguments from both sides. Police in Port Moody are investigating after arresting a 15-year-old who allegedly brandished a knife while chasing another teen through a crowd of students at a busy bus stop. Investigators say a fight yesterday afternoon between two young people escalated into the armed chase. The youth being chased was able to escape unhurt. And Statistics Canada says inflation fell here in BC last month as gasoline prices nudged downward. The latest data shows BC recorded an inflation rate of 2.7% in October, down from 3.3% the month before. And now the forecast on the north coast. A chance of showers this afternoon with a high of 8, highs to 4 with a chance of flurries in the Peace. In the central interior, showers and flurries with a high of +1, highs up to 4 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, some sun and cloud with a high of 5. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, rain beginning late this afternoon with highs around 11. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Lien with BC Today.
All right, thank you so much for that, Rob. And Rob, do you have any money-saving tips? What are you doing in your household?
Money-saving tips?
Yeah.
Not really. I'm trying actually not to waste as much food, to be honest.
That's a good one.
Because I usually waste a lot of food. Trying to cut down on that.
All those odds and ends, those bits, right? Vegetable soup, that's what you got to do.
Sure.
All right, thank you for that, Rob.
You bet.
All right, and welcome back to all of you. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Food banks in BC are seeing more people needing their help this year than at any other time in their 40-year history. And during that time, our CBC BC Food Bank Day has raised more than $18 million thanks to your generosity. And our 37th annual fundraiser takes place Friday, December 1st. I'll tell you how you can donate in just a moment. But first, here's one of the people you'll be helping.
Hi, my name's James Mara, and I've been coming to share for some 13 years here. And it has been a real big blessing because of the high cost of living these days. And so I can get a lot of my needs met just by coming here every 2 weeks. So I appreciate all the labor that goes into this and all the people who give. The pension each month has to go for, of course, the utilities and for a rent with really not too much left over. Yeah, so for example, if I wanted to go to a movie or something like that, well, I wouldn't be able to always do that. I have been a missionary for the past 50 years. Yeah. By missionary meaning maybe helping people to connect with, the one responsible for all this.
And what would the one responsible for all this say about the state that we are in right now in terms of food bank demand?
Right. I'm sure he would like to see people helping each other the best they could. I think that would be a good start, is to just take responsibility as a citizen of Earth or Canada, and I think that would help a lot to share their good fortune, and we appreciate it.
And thank you to James for sharing his story. CBC is gearing up for our 37th annual CBC British Columbia Food Bank Day on Friday, December 1st. Michelle Elliott, who's normally in this chair, and Margaret Gallagher will be hosting a 3-hour special edition of BC Today. We'll have music and lots of special guests, but you don't have to wait to make a donation. You can do that right now at our secure online website, cbc.ca/foodbankday. There's a drop-down menu so you can choose the food bank in BC that you want to donate to. That's cbc.ca/foodbankday. You'll get a tax receipt within a few hours of making your donation. And so, as those who have gone through losing a loved one know it all too well, it takes a lot of time and healing to move forward. It also takes a lot of support. That's at the heart of a new report from the BC Centre for Palliative Care. It takes a look at how people in this province have experienced grief and what more is needed to support people going through that difficult process. And we'll hear more about that report in a moment. But of course, we want to hear from you. What support from employers or the province would have helped you through bereavement? What's missing in BC when it comes to helping people through grief? Call us at 1-800-825-5950. In the Lower Mainland, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And for more on this topic, we're joined by Dr. Iman Hassan. She's the Executive Director for the BC Centre for Palliative Care. Nice to see you, Dr. Hassan.
Thank you so much, Leon. Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you.
Great. And we're also joined by Susan Bradel on the phone line. So Susan was not involved in this report, but she is a counsellor who spent 20 years with the Victoria Hospice and is the author of book In the Shadow of Angels, Intimate Stories from a Hospice Counsellor. Nice to have you on, Susan.
Thank you.
So first question for you, Dr. Hassan. What did you learn about how people in BC deal with grief while putting together this new report?
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share the insights from the report. Well, in 2020, there was a research done that highlighted the profound impact of the pandemic on the grief experience globally. And we heard that the same information from the people on the ground. And that led us to do this, comprehensive, in-depth research to understand the grief experience and the bereavement experience in British Columbia, and also understand how people access supports and where they access it. So as what we learned is that the pandemic resulted in changes to the coping mechanisms available to people who are experiencing grief since the pandemic. Many many of the services were, transitioned or transformed from in-person to virtual supports, and people also were not able to access, have social interaction with their family and friends, and that was a big impact. That caused a big impact on their how they cope with that experience, and that led, and also the multiple losses since the pandemic added some complexity to their grieving experience. People also expressed or shared their experience of not having some access to culturally considerate support resources. So and they don't know where to go and who to ask, and it was real challenge for them. And the most important part that was or finding from the research is that the society as a whole lack a grief literacy. We don't know how to talk to our loved ones who are grieving, and how to support them, and where to direct them to.
Right. Thank you for that. And, you talked about some of that lack of social interaction and what happens when that goes away. And of course, we saw that so much so during the pandemic, during the height of COVID-19. What's the ripple effect amongst loved ones when someone passes away?
Well, as you all know, that it's although grief is a universal experience, the way people express or experience grief can be different. For some people, it will be like in the form of sadness and anger. It can also affect how you think and behave, like having trouble focusing, completing your work, or being at work, crying a lot, wanting to be alone. Sometimes it shows up physically, causing things like getting sick more often, being absent from work, experiencing pain, headaches, or changes in sleep. In some people, this can lead to anxiety and depression, or complicated forms of grief that would require help from a mental health professional.
Yes, absolutely. That support is so important, right? And, that's what we want to hear from all of you, all of our listeners. So our phone lines are open. Give us a call. We want to know what kind of supports would have helped you when you were going through grief and bereavement. What do you think employers and the province can do to help and support you through that process? So give us a call at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. So again, the phone number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, on email at bctoday@cbc.ca. So what support from employers or the province would have helped you through bereavement, and what's missing in BC when it comes to helping people with grief? So now, Susan, I want to turn to you. It's not just, of course, direct family members who are impacted by grief. How are friends, acquaintances, even colleagues affected when someone's going through this? And what's the right way to support them?
Well, I'd like to just address the idea of what's missing in BC. Mm-hmm. And I'd say everything is missing on a big scale. So in answer to your question, there's a huge ripple effect on family members, friends, and colleagues as they watch somebody else going through this process. So, and it's not just after death. There's anticipatory grief as a colleague, for instance, maybe going through, nursing somebody or worried about somebody. And there's a lot that employers can do to help their staff move through that. The first thing is just to recognize the huge impact of loss and grief on a person's social, spiritual, and intellectual, and emotional life.
Mm. Yeah, that recognition to begin with, right? And then beyond that, what do you think needs to happen after that?
Well, I think everybody involved, our entire society, needs to learn how to talk about these things. And we have to remember that that this hits all kinds of people. So my research was about what it's like to work in healthcare and face death every day. But in the course of that research, I talked to people in all kinds of professions, like bankers talk to people, bereaved people, teachers talk to bereaved people. Name a profession, especially anyone who deals with the public in any way, usually has to do with bereavement in some way.
Right. And so, Dr. Hassan, I believe in your report, that was among one of your findings, that need for literacy around, how to respond to grief, and not just for direct family members, but for that support network around it. So what kind of findings did you derive from your research there?
One of the recommendations or the actions that are recommended by all the experts in this area, in the grief and bereavement sector, who came to our roundtable in last year, is they said that we need to enhance the leave day benefits. As you all know, that in BC, employees can take three days off without pay when an immediate family member dies. This benefit basically gives the employee the chance to express their grieving emotions in a safe space and trying to cope with their emotions by attending a funeral or seeking support from family or friends and take care of the family business. And based on the research that we did in BC and the review of the literature, we learned that grief can have a significant impact or profound impact on someone's mental and physical health. So that's why the action plan highlights the reports highlights the importance of enhancing the bereavement leave benefits. And that means, could be like giving more than 3 days off, expanding the eligibility criteria by covering not only the immediate family, but also other people who have been affected by the loss, like, as you said, like co-workers or friend of the person who died. It would also help if this benefit could cover the cost of a number of counseling sessions if needed.
All right. Thank you for that. I'm going to turn to the phone lines now. I've got James, who's in Vancouver, on the line. So, James, thanks for calling in, first of all.
Well, thank you for taking my call.
And tell us, what do you think is missing in terms of support when someone's going through bereavement?
Well, my own personal situation is about a month ago, my daughter, who just turned 17, passed away from a completely unintentional fentanyl overdose.
I'm so sorry.
She had no drug history to speak of, drug use history to speak of, and so, anyways, the police attended, and I haven't been sleeping too well, so bear with me. But the police attended, and the first responders and everything, and there was a representative there from the coroner's office too, and they gave me, or maybe it was, I think there was somebody from the coroner's office, but there's a lady there from the police department who's like personal relations and whatnot, and she gave me a package, and she said, here's some services for counseling. Some you have to pay for, and some are you are free and whatnot. But nobody came out and said, for people who have this issue, have experienced it. As far as I know, there's no service offered by the government, because there has to be at least 50,000 people out there, 5 people for each person who's passed away, the 13,000 in BC, who are just torn apart by this, right? And I had to go out and find a private counselor, and her normal rate's $140 an hour, and I'm paying $90 because she has a sliding scale. I'm a senior and citizen rate on a limited income and whatnot. But also there's a group called Moms Stop the Harm, and they have a support group. But as far as I know, there's nothing offered by the government, which I think is really pathetic, And the thing that really burns me up about this is anybody who's dealing fentanyl can go into 7-Eleven and buy a burner phone, and even if you have the phone number of a dealer, right, which I was able to not find out, but the best friend of my daughter's father called me. I was talking to him one day, and he says, I got the phone number of the dealer, right? But even with the phone number, the police have their hands tied. They can't do a thing because they just throw these phones away and they're untraceable. So, it's like a loophole, and so anyways, maybe your guest there knows if the government has some service that is offered to people like me, because I'd sure like to know about it.
Yeah, thank you for that, James. Again, so sorry to hear about the passing of your daughter. On the one hand, you're dealing with a loss, and then you feel like there's such a lack of justice afterwards that you can actually achieve. And so, Susan, I want to turn to you. I want to take James' questions to you. Is this, a scenario that you hear about often in the work that you've done, where people feel like, at the end of the day, that it's so unaffordable to even try and get that counseling or that kind of support?
Yeah. It's true. It's very expensive. And I worked for Victoria Hospice, and they did have a bereavement department, but over the years, it's just been cut and cut and cut. And they run through donations. And so there may be some resources, at community centers and through local hospices, but it's basically funded by donation. And there has to be money found for this because it's got such a huge impact.
Right. And so we know that there is a mental health support line here in BC. The phone number is 604-310-6789, and you can call that toll free as well at any time. The number is 310-6789. It's not a 604 number. Apologies for that. But Dr. Hassan, I see you nodding away again as I'm reading that phone number. What are some of the resources that you know of that you think people should be turning to, or are there other supports that government should be supplying? We heard Susan talking about the cuts to such a much needed resource.
Definitely, we have a number of resources, but still we have they are not enough. But I cannot speak enough of the grief and bereavement support resources or services provided by the community hospices. Like, we have over 75 hospice societies across BC in rural and remote areas and in urban and suburban communities. They have very good, support, very good grief and bereavement support services. There's also the BC Bereavement Helpline, who have people to talk to, and also they have a directory of all the programs or in the community, or the either affordable or free or service, like provide affordable or free services. The Canadian Virtual Hospice, they provide a lot of information, like for people how to cope with their own grief, if it's a simple form of grief, how to support others. And there's, on our website, we have a number of, a list of grief and bereavement support resources that people can go to.
And do you know, Dr. Hassan, how long these supports are there for? Is there a time period within when people, can actually tap into these sources?
The BC Bereavement Helpline, there is no wait time or anything. It's a phone number. It's a toll-free phone number that they can call, and someone will be on the line talking to the person, and then at the end providing the emotional support and the peer support. They are well trained to do that, and they, at the end of the call, they direct them or link them to the appropriate resource in their community. That, depending on whether they need free resource or affordable or for fee.
And so I just wanted to give that phone number, the BC Bereavement Helpline number. It's 1-877-779-2223. If you need that support is there. And Dr. Hassan says there is no time limit on when you can tap into that. So you can call at any time that you feel like you need it. And I know this is a very difficult topic to talk about. But we want to hear your experiences as you've gone through bereavement. What did you experience? What kind of supports do you feel would have helped you? So our phone numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. We've just got about 5 minutes left towards the end of our program, but please do feel free. You can call in, and we want to hear from you. All right. So, Dr. Sun, you gave a number of resources. Do you feel, though, that there's more that governments should be doing based on the research and the report that you helped to author?
There's definitely a lot to be done, and in the report there are many actions recommended by the people on the ground, the people with lived experience who have experienced grief and bereavement in different contexts or as a result of different type of losses. They are the ones who recommended these actions collectively. So there's definitely one of the recommended actions is that we need to have a policy or a strategy for grief and bereavement, and with clarity about the different types of griefs or the level of griefs in terms of complexity, and each level, how we cope with it, what resources exist in our province or even nationally across Canada to reach out to at what time in the point in the grief experience or journey the person should seek professional help from a mental health professional. So it's and there are many free resources that exist, but it's peer support, and people appreciate it. Like British Columbians from our research who participated in our research, they expressed huge interest, and they appreciate a lot the support that they receive from trained individuals in community organizations like hospice societies. They said it was really valuable, and they need more access to these resources.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Hassan. So I wanted to bring in an email from one of our listeners. So Marnie writes, I think the two most important things when somebody is grieving about a death are, number one, realize that everybody grieves differently and takes different lengths of time. Make allowances for each individual and help each person according to his or her needs. Number two, don't be afraid to ask openly what you can do. The person is grieving, somebody who has already died. It won't make it any better or worse to address the issue directly. And so I just have a minute left very quickly. Susan, I just want to come to you. If somebody does tell you that they're dealing with a death, that they're bereaved, what do you think is, the first thing that we should be saying, or what's the best approach that we should be taking?
Well, saying something like, I am so glad that you're talking to me about this, and I would love to talk to you more about it and find out what it is that you need from me, what you need from people around you, and see if I can help you to get your needs met.
Right. Okay. Great advice. Thank you for that. And that's when I have to say goodbye to the both of you. Susan Bridle, who is a registered clinical counselor. And thank you as well to Dr. Iman Hassan from the BC Centre for Palliative Care. Thank you to the both of you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
So
it's
much,
our pleasure.
Take care.
Yeah.
And to all of our listeners, stay with us here on CBC Radio 1. And for our live stream viewers, you can switch over to radio or listen on the CBC Listen app. The fall economic statements from the federal government will begin in about 2 minutes, so about a minute and a half at 1 o'clock Pacific. You can stay with us for that. That's it for our show today. My thanks to everyone who called in and joined the discussion.